Now may we invite Ms. Iris Hoi, President of the Hong Kong Institute of Landscape Architects, as our guest moderator in our panel discussion, with Professor Kong-jian and Dr. Wendy Chen. Ms. Iris Hoi is a registered landscape architect with over 30 years of professional practice experience in Hong Kong and Canada. She has been actively involved in the Hong Kong Institute of Landscape Architects since 1991, where she has contributed under different roles. Professionally, Iris is a director at Urbis Limited with experience in both landscape architecture and landscape master planning in Hong Kong and mainland China. Now, I would like to pass the time to our moderator. And Ms. Hoi, Professor Yu, and Dr. Chen, I'll pass the time to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can all hear me well. I'm very honored to be part of this panel discussion, and indeed very honored to be here with Professor Yu and Dr. Chen to start our first discussion session for this conference. I think indeed this morning's talks are all very inspiring. It gives a lot of messages, but all the messages are all revolving around urban forestry, urban greening, and the health and well-being of its citizens, the people that live in the cities. So I welcome any questions that audience may have, and I will try to pass all your questions on to the speakers. So this morning, I'm very honored to have Professor Yu and Dr. Chen with me to discuss some of the pertinent questions and topics that we heard this morning. So I'll kick off with a question for Professor Yu. Professor Yu, you're an influential advocate for ecological approaches to urban development. And this message really resonates with all the talks that we heard this morning. So can you share with us your journey on how you've managed to convince decision makers in China to help make the change towards nature-based solutions in urban development?
Thank you, Iris. It is a wonderful question. I think as a professional, particularly in the Chinese administrative system, you have to be political. So when I went back to China 25 years ago, the first thing I do is to lecture to the mayors, to ministers, and write letters, send messages to top leadership. So I have there's a book, there's a couple books actually. Particularly there's an English book called Letters to Leaders of China. You will see it's published in New York by Michael Sorkin. It's Michael Sorkin. He just passed away. So including my letter in 2006, I actually sent a very powerful, I think it's really about ecological security pattern, letter to the Prime Minister at that time is Wendy. And lucky enough, I get a very positive response from him. And he actually sent a message to the ministers, the Ministry of Construction and Urban Construction, the Ministry of Environmental Protection, and the Ministry of at that time, it is a cultural, we call this cultural ministry. So, and we get a very positive message, and so that's the beginning. Have a ecological security patterns, ecological infrastructure concept become into this 18th Congress of Chinese CCCPC, the Chinese People's Congress. So the beginning of how we should consider the ecological security at national scale, and across the scale. Now that's just one example. Another example is the Sponge City. In 2012, Beijing got flooded. So I sent letters to President again, to the mayors, and I even published openly. I have published the letter in Wenhui Bao, which is really widely distributed in 2012. I call for sponge cities, a nature-based solution, because all Chinese cities failed in terms of how we address flood or address climate change. Because in the past 40 years, we just copy this Western model, the dumping this infrastructure model, the grid models, it's a pipe system model. And we forget all the Chinese cities actually suffering the monsoon climate. But we never have this monsoon climate kind of infrastructure. And we overthrow our tradition of ancient wisdom, like in Hong Kong, like Pearl River Delta, particularly in Pearl River Delta area, which is based on nature, resilient nature to solve the problem of flood. In Guangzhou, we have thousands of tributary of river system. And during the past 40 years, we filled all this, we channelize, we concretize, we destroy the agricultural, civilization-based, nature-based solution. So now, because of this flood, because of the survival issue, the Chinese leadership get to understand, the mayors get to understand. So this one, I think that's to send this message, to educate the people, to educate particularly the mayor, but that's not enough. We have to build a project. We have to make examples to show them that the alternative is better. So that's why back 25 years ago, we have a project built in Zhongshan City where we actually remove the flood wall. We keep the tree, the shipyard park. You will see that there's no flood wall for the park. And in Zhejiang, in Taizhou, 2003, we also de-channelize the river. We remove the concrete, and the river come back. Now, these projects get globally recognized, and the mayors are visited, and eventually the leadership, the ministers, like the hydraulic, the Ministry of Water can also gradually understand. But still, we are in a time of industrial civilization. We still depend on the great infrastructure to protect it, to manage our city, and that's we have to fight against again for at least for another 20 years, I would think. Yeah, many stories, but I think because of so many successful projects, you will see gradually individual cities get inspired.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Professor Yu. I think what I'm hearing is the importance of blue-green. We hear blue-green a lot. Blue means how we treat our water. Green means how we deal with vegetation. And we hear that from this morning, several speakers. But I think you hit something that is very close to heart here, in that Dr. Matthews talked about the situation of blue-green in Europe, and Professor Beatley talked about the situation of blue-green in the U.S. But the situation of blue-green and climate change is very different in this part of the world. That, like you say, we have Asian climates, we have Asian topography, and we have Asian situations. So, talking about this, let me ask a question for Dr. Chen. The Greater Bay Area, you know so much about it, and you've studied it. So some basic facts. So the Greater Bay Area has an area of 56,000 square kilometers, a population of 86 million people, and a GDP of $1,668 billion US. And in comparison, the world famous San Francisco Bay Area has an area of 44,000 or so square kilometers, a population of 7.75 compared to our 80, and a GDP of $525 billion US compared to our already established 1,668. So we are already very well advanced in terms of our population and economical development in the Greater Bay Area. So how do you see this approach of your presentation, how re-greening our riverscape, nature-based solutions, and introducing, a better approach to the blue-green concept, as Professor Yu just mentioned. How does that all help us achieve a more biophilic, healthy, and more carbon neutral? I want to talk about carbon neutral later, but just a very long question. But, how do we gel all these things together for the future of Greater Bay Area?
Yeah, thank you, Iris. It's not easy, but I think the high population density and the better economic development both present some challenges and, in the meanwhile, opportunities. If we look at challenges, it's because that in this area, we learn from our failures, like this Professor Yu mentioned. And of course, we are quickly accumulating our experiences, also successful experiences in the past 2 or 3 decades already. So this high population density means that people get used to the compact development pattern in urban area. And then we may be able to save more land for our new introduced nature. And we have opportunities, of course, here. But of course, we need to have more understanding of our own geographical, climatological, and ecological situation. And we need to understand what we have and then where we would like to go. And with regard to the economic development, we are very happy to see now the Pearl River Delta, particularly the Greater Bay Area, is leading many new innovation in technology, scientific development, and advancement, and so on and so forth. So we trust here we can see many opportunities. We can share our successful experience, especially the use of our traditional wisdom, our old systems, which has already been successfully implemented and practiced for so many years. Just in the last couple of decades, it has been those have been forgotten. And so that means that we are facing many challenges, and we are also embracing many opportunities. In this, I trust that we can understand what challenges are there and what opportunities are there. So then we can introduce scientific-based, nature-based solutions, especially the restoration of blue-green infrastructure, not only in urbanized areas, but also in like urban peripheries and countryside areas. Then overall, we can build a very sustainable, carbon neutral, resilient Greater Bay Area.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. So it's very interesting that you are, Dr. Chen, you are an educator, a researcher. Professor Yu, you're also a landscape architect as well as an educator. I think as a landscape architect myself, we're all here very passionate about the aspect of landscape architecture and how that can help build the city and the world tomorrow. I think in landscape architecture, what we are all concerned with is not only how to build a greener, bluer world, but also how to build it beautifully, and also how to remember our history. So, Professor Yu, all your projects that you've shown us are very beautiful to be in, to look at. And Dr. Chen, you keep reminding us of the Lingnan history, culture. We have to remember the human history. So with all of these combined, And I want to talk about politics because Professor Yu, you mentioned that we have to be political in this part of the world. Now, President Xi Jinping said that he wants our carbon emission to be maximum at 2030 and to be carbon neutral by 2060. Not in addition to what you mentioned in the 18th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, where the party declared an ecological civilization. So all of these political moves towards a better world, how can we as landscape architects help to communicate that message further to everyone of our contribution in this great fight to climate change? I think both of your questions, Professor Yu first.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think this is a critical or challenging and also opportunity for the profession. The profession is really misunderstood. We don't have a bigger vision yet. I would say the profession is too small. It's too small because I think it's just because we didn't just demonstrate that how important the profession is. I'm thinking three aspects that we can make a contribution to the ecological civilization. Yeah, profession-wise. So the planning, we're talking a lot about planning. I think landscape should take the leadership in planning the landscape of Pearl River Delta area, or the Bay Area, you would say, or even the national scale or planet scale, I would say. Planning landscape or nature-based means nature can provide services. Nature is infrastructure. And there's no other profession than landscape architecture can provide this kind of planning concept. Yeah. So I will quote from Ian McHugh. Yeah, this is a time that we have to think landscape architecture as the art of survival. Yeah. So for the survival of the humanity, survival for the city, survival for the individual people in the city. So that's why we did the planning, mass planning. We call it ecological secure patterning. Give up the idea. I mean, we are not doing just gardening. Gardening is just a tiny part of the profession. We have to think of the global thinking, the planet. That's why I think we have to think like a king. Yeah. The second, certainly, we should be able to do beautiful projects. The difference we can make from as an ecologist or as an environmentalist or a civil engineer is that we can solve the problem beautifully. We are not just solving the problem, but we can solve the problem beautifully. We are a combination of art and ecology. We engineer and ecology. So that makes profession different. So we have to make a project beautifully. That's at urban scale, at project scale. And the third, I think we can make a contribution to define a new lifestyle. The project we made, the service we made is provide a lifestyle, a green lifestyle. But because eventually, humanity is a green planet, have to be solved by a new lifestyle. For transportation, we need to provide a bicycle system, for example. For food, we should be able to design our urban agriculture which can provide green food, ecologically safe, secure food. For urban and for even the rural area, we should be able to create a healthier agricultural ecosystem that can produce food, but also create a habitat for biodiversity, but also create a beautiful lifestyle, a beautiful hotel, a beautiful building, a beautiful design, So those lifestyle is more important than anything else. But it is different level. Planning, spatial planning, we think is a global planet, and design an individual living environment and behavior, green behavior, that we have to be able to provide this kind of space for people to behave greenly, in a green way. That's my thinking, yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Chen?
Yes, it's my turn. And especially after Professor Yu and long time no see. And I'm so happy to meet you here. And also, maybe I can go back to the basic concept you have mentioned, Iris, the ecological civilization proposed by our central government. I think it signals a transition from the old economic driven paradigm to another one, more environmentally friendly, ecological driven or ecological prioritized. So you can see from the top management, we can understand there is a commitment to the ecological development, which can definitely help landscape architecture and many other relevant disciplines to rethink about their passion, their work, their projects, to see how we can integrate our design, our plannings with the new thinking, with a slightly emphasis on the ecological and environmental aspect. Like Professor Yu highlighted that a beautiful design at different scales, of course, can help us to mitigate carbon emission. But we need to, as educators, we need to educate our political leaders, and also we couldn't forget about the practitioners and the general public, because we need their understanding. We need them to help us. We need to understand their expectations. And then we can address successfully the social demand and address their demands to meet their expectations, so that the anticipated greening lifestyle, new lifestyle, as Professor Yu mentioned, can really be enjoyed, be established in our wide society.
Thank you very much. Both Dr. Chen and Professor Yu, you've given us a lot of food for thought. And on behalf of the Hong Kong Institute of Landscape Architects and on behalf of the organizers, thank you very, very much for your morning's contribution. And I think we look forward to many more very rewarding talks to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Iris.
Thank you, Ms. Hoi, Professor Yu, and Dr. Chen for the insightful discussion. Thank you very much. I believe that our audience has learned a lot from the discussion.